All right, I am so excited about this tonight, just because there have been so many things on my mind, and there's one topic that I'm going to talk about tonight. It's actually been on my mind for a few weeks, and I just keep kind of pushing it off and pushing it off and pushing it off. So tonight's going to be the night I'm talking about that topic. So, and I think it's going to be kind of an interesting one. I had somebody last night at a dance I was at. She goes, "I can't wait till we get to like the good stuff or the nitty gritty." I'm like, well, might be happening tomorrow night, so we'll see. At least some of it, not all of it, because as we go on, it's going to get, we can have ups and downs with it. But for tonight, I am just grateful that you guys are here and sharing your Sunday evening with me. I had a couple of thoughts, and the thought foremost in my mind is I want to talk about boundaries. Now, a lot of times, though, I like to start off with kind of a spiritual thought or quote or something by a leader. And I just came off of a 3-hour online committee meeting. So my brain just kind of right there. So the thoughts I have actually go back to a hymn that we sang today in sacrament meeting. And it was, the title in it is "'Tis Eventide, O Savior, stay this night with me." Remember that one?
Yeah.
Because there have been a lot of people that have been talking about, including myself, kind of being in a funk lately. And, so for some people, that can be a challenge to kind of get out of. And so this morning, while we were singing that hymn, the words just kind of stood out with me more than they normally do, I guess. Especially the chorus, "O Savior, stay this night with me, behold, 'tis eventide. O Savior, stay this night with me, behold, 'tis eventide." It says, "The day is past and gone, the shadows of the evening fall, the night is coming on, within my heart a welcome guest, within my home abide. Thy walk today with me has made my heart within me groan. As I communed with thee, thy earnest words have filled my soul and kept me near thy side. And lone will be the night if I cannot commune with thee, nor find thee in my light. The darkness of the world I fear would in my home abide." And so those thoughts to me just kind of came together when I was in sacrament meeting today, because this last week was another roller coaster ride with me in my house, and I had another contract terminate on my house, and I'm just thinking I'm just not selling my house. I even had a friend go, "Paula, maybe it's just not the Lord's will for you to sell your house." I'm like, maybe, because it's just not working out. But just kind of being in kind of a slump, and I don't know if you guys have ever felt that, but I do. Sometimes I just feel like I just got a day or two, or sometimes it goes into a week of just feeling like that. I don't know how else to say that. Just kind of being in some sort of a funk. Not that you're in a depression, but you're just kind of in you're just feeling like you got the weight of the world on you, and you're just trying to keep plowing forward, and finally you're just like taking a break from the world. You ever feel like that? I do. Those are usually the days I'm in my PJs or my yoga pants, and I'm just chilling for a little bit and just kind of shutting it down. Now, I can't completely shut down because I do work from home, and I also have a pretty extensive involved assignment, calling, whatever, with the church. But I can still do less and take some time to just kind of rejuice and rejuvenate. So I was able to do that this last week, and I think I'm through it. But I also know that there are other people going through that as well. So I think about that. And I thought about that even in the temple yesterday, about how much we rely on the Lord being with us, and in His timing, and in His will, and His whatever, right? Like we hear that a lot, because we want it to be the Lord's will, and we want to be able to be waiting on the Lord's timing. And I'm sure that in our heart of hearts, we want to be patient and wait on the Lord's timing. But some of us just want it now, right? Like I've heard of people who have given up on going to church, or given up on dating in the church, or given up on whatever, because it didn't work out the way that they felt like it needed to, and in their timing. I receive messages from people a lot where they'll ask me, Paula, what am I doing wrong that I'm not able to find somebody? Or what is it that you think I could do better, or whatever? And quite honestly, the only thing we needed to really do is focus on our own personal and spiritual development and being the right person versus finding the right person, and trusting in the Lord's timing, and in trusting in the Lord, and realizing it's not all on you. Quite honestly, not a lot of it depends on you. I mean, it depends on your actions. Like, you've got to be in the right place, right, for things to happen, because the Lord just, most of the time, is not going to have somebody knocking at your door and going, hello, I'm your answer to prayer. But there are just different things that we will experience in our life that we need to experience, or maybe that person needs to experience before we're going to meet, before we're going to be ready for each other. So if your focus can be more on serving other people when you feel like you can, on your own personal development, your own spiritual development, and preparing for whatever the Lord has in store for you next in your life, whatever your next step is. I don't know what that is, but the Lord does. And I think between you and the Lord, you can figure that out. And that's something that has gotten me through. I hear a lot of people say to me, Paul, I don't know how you do it. But they probably see me on some of my best days. I'm not going to show the world my worst days, right? Like, for instance, there are people, I learned a long time ago from a stake peasant's wife, and I have relied on this heavily, because I used to say a lot, well, I'm not like, this sister in the Lord, I can't be like her, or I wish I was like whatever, right? And she said, Paula, you don't know what they're going through in their own life, and you don't need to compare your Wednesday worst with their Sunday best. So that has gotten me through a lot, and it's helped me a lot. Because when you guys see me on Facebook Live or on these webinars or whatever, I mean, I'm real, don't get me wrong. You're seeing me, I don't, go touch up makeup. You don't see me shiny and all. You're going to see me whatever. I'm real. But if I'm having, a really bad day or whatever, that's usually not the day that I'm choosing to show the world. Whoa, here I am. So anyway, those do happen to everybody. We all have our ups and downs. We all have our stuff in our life. And there's things I just don't talk about going on in my life that it's hard for me to talk about. I mean, even still on the webinars, I talked about a lot of things, and I've shared a lot of things, and I've been very vulnerable with you guys. But there's still a lot, though, that's not out there. And a lot of it I'm still processing and trying to figure out within myself, how am I going to deal with whatever, right? So, and we all kind of have that. We all kind of have that. So I want you to take those thoughts into our topic of boundaries. And when I say boundaries, you can think of it as standards, but that to me is not the same thing. It's more boundaries of what we expect of other people to treat us, what we allow other people to treat us, how we expect or allow people to talk to us, how we react to different things, how we see other people. And whether you're in a friendship, whether you're in a dating relationship, whether you're in a family relationship or whatever, it is different. And there are different dynamics in those three different relationships. They're not all necessarily going to be the same. Okay? So For instance, if you're in a family relationship and you're parenting teenagers, that can be fun, right? So I parented 5 teenagers, or 5 people that went through the teen years, and some were easier than others, let's just say that. But I learned some things through there that no matter what, they knew that no matter how they talked to me, they knew no matter what they said to me or what they did or whatever, that I was still going to be there for them and I was still going to love them. And even as adults, I think deep down they know that. My daughter questions that sometimes because I don't necessarily accept everything that she does or says or whatever. And I'm like, doesn't mean I don't love you, just means I don't like that, you know? So there's a difference in that. And then I remember there was a woman back when all my kids were at home, and I had teenagers and little kids and whatever, and I was single trying to wing everything and make it all work. And she said, I don't know what it is that you do that your kids speak to you and with respect, and they treat you with that. And no, they didn't always do that, okay, but for the most part they did. But I told her, and this is what I taught my kids, that it's a two-way thing. I will talk to you a certain way, and you talk to me that way. And there are certain things I did not allow or tolerate or whatever. Whenever they did have a bad day, usually, you know, it was a thing of they had some chill out time somewhere, and then we'd chat about it later. Because generally when people are angry or upset, that's not the best time to have a conversation with somebody, right? So anyway, whenever you're dealing with somebody like those that's not your kids or not your family, then you have a different relationship with them, be it a friendship or a dating relationship. So with a friendship, again, you know, that's terms that are generally cordial, and you know, you can have a conversation, and you're generally not going to go into a whole lot of vulnerabilities depending on the status of your relationship. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. There'll be some things that you'll share and be able to open up with. There'll be other things that you won't. But in a dating relationship, then that's a little different. So when we talk about boundaries, a lot of times I like having this discussion with people because people have different ideas, thoughts, aspects of this. And so I really want to get this into a discussion instead of just me just talking to you guys. Being able to talk about this. So a boundary, for instance, could be somebody saying, we just met, so a boundary, a standard, or whatever word you want to give it, that I have is, you know, as we date, like let's say somebody accepted a dinner invitation or something from somebody, as we date, here's what, here's something that I will allow. Now, a lot of times we're not going to verbalize that on the first date. You might run somebody off the scale and go, wait a minute, she's already making rules and being out controlling and whatever, right? Like, you don't want to do that. Sometimes that could just come across more in body language. Or in conversation, you can do it in another way. So generally, though, with the boundary conversations, we can work that in different ways. I know something that I like is I like it when someone waits a few dates before they start trying to hold my hand or, you know, bring in any type of a physical, more intimate, if you will, kissing or whatever relationship. Because if we just met, I don't know that person. And that person is in my personal space, and I'm just trying to get to know them. Even if there is an attraction or whatever, you want to make sure that you start off on a good foundation of friendship. What I have found is that when people start off, and I've even heard this from therapists that I've been to, when people start off when they've just met, or even start off a relationship with instant physical intimacy type stuff, that it generally ends about as fast as it begins. It does not last. I'm not saying that there aren't those that do. There's always the exception, right? But in general, those don't last because they have kind of a not so great foundation that just kind of washes away. Now, that can be a boundary, right? Like that can be kind of an expectation of, okay, here's what I'm okay with and here's what I'm not okay with. There are different boundaries in relationships, period. And what you're okay with people doing, treating you, talking to you about, whatever. For you to be able to say, I'm not comfortable having this conversation right now, is stating a boundary, stating a whatever. But now when you do meet somebody or you start going out or whatever, you want to just kind of keep it casual with conversation and keeping it, getting to know you, and then building up from there. Then, there's not like any stipulations or guidelines per se that, I don't know if there's any perfect little setup in a perfect world in our situation, because most of us are looking at remarrying or marrying for the first time in later years. So a lot of times that's different. And I know that some of you have had time to think about this kind of thing, and I want to have a conversation about it. But I do know that, like with therapists, I have learned, and this is coming from men and women, that people who do push that physical intimacy early on, or they start calling and texting multiple times every day and other things going on like that when they first meet you or they first start a relationship with you, that is generally red flag. That is generally something that you want to avoid, because it means 90 to 95% of the time they're either controlling, abusive, or an addict. So those are some boundaries, and that's more why I bring that up. And that can, again, women can be ruthless with pursuing a man, and a man can be very quick to pursue as well. They can both have very healthy relationships without that being a part of it. I'm not saying there's not an exception, but I do know that there's ways that if you've been working on preparing yourself for somebody and they've been preparing themselves for someone, then you're going to be able to develop a healthy relationship within healthy boundaries. I hope I'm making sense. I feel like I've just been talking. So I'd like to just open that up for a little bit and get your thoughts on what you guys think, do, whatever, and let's see where this one takes us tonight, because I do want to kind of open this up, because a lot of us are wanting to remarry and are wanting a healthy relationship, and boundaries are important.
I can talk some. I go to a relationship skills class every week, and so boundaries are something that we've talked about quite a bit, and just kind of some of what you said. There's different kinds of boundaries as far as on one end of the spectrum you have porous boundaries, meaning you want to be physically intimate very quickly, or you overshare things, or you try to get every detail of somebody's life and like get into their life, or you also on the flip side, like you can be pushed or manipulated by someone more easily. And then on the other side is rigid boundaries, and that's what we think of as having your walls up. I'm not going to trust anybody, I'm not going to let them in, I'm not going to let anybody get close to me, And so what we aim for is something in the middle, appropriate boundaries, healthy ones. And there's something that I've heard a few times and had in different settings, but it's called the relationship attachment model. And it's basically, the relationship should be founded on 5 pillars, and they go in order. And meaning that no subsequent pillar should be ahead of a previous pillar. So what they are is know. So getting to know who a person is, know about them. And the second one is trust. Being able to trust that, they are who they say they are, that they are an honest person, that they're not lying or anything like that. Then the third one is commit. And that can be, commit ranges the whole gamut. At the very low end, you have things like, hey, when you, come pick me up, I, ran out of dish soap. Can you grab me dish soap at the store? It can be something very simple like that, where you make a commitment that they keep, or like, hey, I need to talk to you about something. Can we talk tonight? And they're like, yes. And you're like, okay, let me call you at like 8. And they're like, okay. And then do they keep that commitment? And that leads to the next one, which is rely. Can you rely on that person to keep those commitments, as well as, rely on them emotionally, that, if you share something with them, it's going to be kept in confidence, that, if you talk to them, that they can help you through a problem or things like that. So rely. And then the last one is touch, which is, the physical side of things. And so, you have to kind of do those in order. And it's not like you have to do know all the way and then trust, but you just have to keep the pillars, at an angle. Like know has to be the highest and then down from there. And so, saying that, relationships obviously are all different. And so it just depends, especially in this day and age, like how do you count dates? I mean, I can find somebody online and we can talk for like hours, over the course of several days or whatever before we actually meet. And so the no is really high, but the other ones aren't as much because you haven't actually met in person, and so, it just depends. So as you get to know somebody, then that first date may be completely different than if you meet somebody at a dance and talk to them for like 10 minutes and then you have a first date. You know what I mean? So I don't think there's necessarily hard and fast rules about, what date do you hold hands on and what date do you talk about your divorce and stuff like that. But it's more in getting to a point where you feel comfortable that that person and you can trust them and you can open up to them and things like that. And, keeping that, that attachment model in line the way it should be, and not relying on somebody before or trust them, and things like that. So those are just a few of my thoughts based on, various classes and things that I've taken.
I totally agree. And I appreciate you bringing up the relationship attachment model. That's awesome. So we've got know, commit, rely, and touch, correct? Right?
Yeah. Know, trust, commit, rely.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, because as you get to know somebody, you can learn to trust them, that they're telling the truth, that they are who they say they are, that kind of thing. And that will lead you to commit and then rely,
That's awesome. I appreciate that. And my daughter's getting her grad degree in marriage and family therapy. I remember her sharing that with me too, and that's really awesome. So basically, Brian summed it up way better than what I was trying to say on the way to develop a healthy relationship and being able to have those boundaries and being able to create them in a way that will lead you to have a much better relationship. Any other thoughts on that?
Um, I think as far as boundaries go, not everybody's going to have the same boundaries. As far as, there's like the two ends, and then there's a whole spectrum in the middle that's healthy, and it's not like a tiny spectrum. There's a range. Some people are more comfortable opening up, some people aren't, and nobody has to be necessarily at this one. There's not this one sweet spot that everybody has to get to. It's more, there's a range that as long as you're in here and you feel comfortable, it's healthy.
Right. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that you said, about this, because there is no, certain way. Okay, if we did this, and then here we are. Oh, we're on this date. We're going to be doing whatever. There's just no way to guide somebody that way, because it is just your own relationship development with somebody. Now, in getting to know people, there are, and I know we covered this a little bit before on different questions or how to ask questions or that kind of thing before. Tonight, I would like to talk a little bit more about the trust, because there are a lot of people that are hanging on to fear and have a really tough time giving that up. I think inherently they want to, but I think just overall, it's just hard for them to let it go, and some people don't know how. I know I went through a couple of years of I wanted to let it go, but I didn't know how. And I think a lot of other people are there. I mean, I was able to move past that, but there are other people, and maybe their stage of being single is newer. Like maybe it's within the first couple of years, or maybe it's whatever, and they're still kind of working through the process and things, right? But I know that we've been told a lot that we can't feel faith and fear at the same time. But for some people, fear is really comfortable to feel when you're approaching a relationship and you want to just go, maybe you feel like you're getting your toes in the water, and then you're going to find something and you're going to be like, nope, that didn't work out. Right? Because fear means opening up. It means becoming vulnerable, and not vulnerable in a way of just, weak or showing weakness, but vulnerable in a way of allowing somebody into your personal space, into your personal life, maybe sharing stuff that's personal that you don't want everybody to know, kind of thing. And that can be a really big deal. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about fear and what that looks like. Yeah.
Paula?
Uh-huh.
Is that to me?
Yes.
Okay. I once had a therapist who said, when you have been in this place, this negative place for so long, that you can't remember what good feels like. And so when you start to feel it, it frightens you because it's uncomfortable. And you're going to have to flip that switch and just be comfortable with being uncomfortable for a while you get used to the good feelings. Because human beings are the most adaptable animals on the planet. They can adapt to the best or the worst situations and get comfortable there if they don't know of a way out.
Okay, that's awesome.
So I think we do that. And I think that, at least for me, I don't have the same boundaries with everybody.
Right.
I can know somebody, and I've known somebody for 3 decades. And there are still boundaries that I will not let that person cross, even though he has the best of intentions, that I will let somebody I've only known for 3 months cross because I am more comfortable with them. So length of time doesn't have any, it isn't necessarily important to me. But then again, I haven't had a date in 10 years, and I'm okay with that.
Okay.
But, somebody I've known at church that's been trying to get me to marry him for 20 years, and I won't even hold hands with him.
Right. Well, yeah.
Somebody I met at church for 3 months goes and gives me a hug today, and I hear a teenager say, he hugged her.
Well, yeah, but that does go back to, we're not going to have the same boundaries with everybody, and friendship
Right.
is different than dating relationships. So yeah, so that's a great example of that.
Yeah.
So what does fear look like though for you guys? Let's open that up.
Well, I can share some. So after my wife passed away, I had to do some healing and some introspection and all that kind of stuff. And I got to a place where I was ready to start dating again. And after kind of getting my feet wet and getting that initial, tentativeness and nervousness out of the way, I was kind of fearless. Really, like I was, hey, I'm not worried about getting hurt and all this kind of stuff. And that was all good and well for about 18 months. And then I was in a relationship and realized that I had some trauma from my past that, wasn't really healed. And, walls came up, of course. And, I realized I had more work to do. And it wasn't even voluntary. It was because of fear. Like, literally, like walls closing around my heart. Before that, it was open. I was willing to share, everything with the woman I was dating, as far as, like all my thoughts and feelings and everything like that. And as soon as that happened, just closed off. And it wasn't even intentional, it just happened. And that's what I've found is it's the difference between being closed off and being open, and not even just in, a romantic relationship. I find that when I am not in a good place, when I'm fearful, even just like talking to people at church, I'm not as, it's not even friendly, just I'm not as open and engaging and, willing to interact. I'm more like closed into myself, and I think we all can have that tendency at times, and so to me, that's what fear looks like. And so it's hard because, it's kind of a bad cycle where when something happens that dampens your faith and you get scared, then that just makes you more likely to lose faith and get more scared. And so it's difficult, but yeah, that's kind of what it looks like to me.
Thank you for sharing.
I agree with Brian. When I get fearful in any kind of a relationship with somebody, I don't talk. I withdraw. I'll close myself up in the house and not even go out. I'll sit on the sidelines instead of participating in whatever activity I'm at, and avoid whatever has scared me. And they don't even know that they've done it. But on a good night, when I'm not feeling scared, then I'm going out and I'm talking to the people that aren't getting attention.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
To help them feel more comfortable at the activity.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they don't want that attention,
Right.
and I need to go away because they're not ready for it.
Sure.
But I'm more outgoing when I'm not afraid.
Yeah. Right. So they may be dealing with their own fear.
What?
You said that they may be dealing with their own fear.
Right. Right.
Okay. So anyone else have any thoughts on that? On what does fear look like to you?
Sorry for being late tonight, guys. But I just, for me, I've noticed in the last, I don't even go call it a relationship, the last person I talked to, I felt like I was very open and willing to communicate and be very vulnerable. And they felt very vulnerable as well. But then when I started seeing red signs that made me nervous of things that I have dealt with in the past, I was very open and honest about those things. And it's like they didn't want to hear those things. And so that made me shut down and become fearful that even though I was starting to like this person, that I wasn't able to trust them. And because I wasn't able to trust them, I started pulling back. Because I think that when I'm trying to be open and vulnerable, and I'm, asking the same of the person that I like, and I'm finding things that are scary to me, it's really hard for me to stay 100% engaged without, pulling back some. And, ultimately there was enough things there where I had to shut the whole thing down. And then I was kind of, told that I wasn't ready to be in a relationship. And that's fine. They can have their own opinion of whatever they want. But I just started seeing things that made me nervous about what my future looked like. And that made me scared. So I don't think I have any problems being vulnerable in the beginning. It's when I start running into things that are really glaring red flags that should scare me. It's okay for me to be afraid. I then kind of pull back, and it makes it really difficult for me to stay engaged in that relationship. So that fear, that's how fear manifests itself for me.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's awesome that you also shared a way where you are able to be vulnerable but still recognize things without justifying or overlooking it or pushing it aside as if, it'll all work itself out, right?
Right, yeah. I know it's not going to work itself out. I mean, some of those red flags I've dealt with in the past, and unless and until people want to actually fix those red flags, they're not going to work themselves out.
Right.
They're not just going to go away on their own.
Correct. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, so when we think of fear, and then we can also move into trust, being able to let go of fear anyway. Let's talk for a few minutes on the flip side of that, and what it means to trust somebody, and what that feels like to know I can trust them completely. Now, I'm going to use an example of committee because I work with a couple of them, and I'm leading a couple of them, and I love these people. And we don't always see eye to eye. We don't always, sometimes there's a conflict of opinion, shall we say. But I still trust that person, and I still love that person, and I'm still working with them. And so sometimes, even when there's a conflict, that doesn't mean that relationship's null and void or whatever, right? Like there are some people that feel like, oh no, if there's a conflict, then we're done. I actually went out with somebody last year, and that was kind of his thing, is if there was conflict, he was done. Because he only wanted perfect peace all the time. Or at least he wanted peace all the time. I don't know about perfect, but he wanted peace all the time. And if there was a conflict, he didn't want to live with it. And I'm like, it's not really a healthy way of looking at relationships, because you're not always going to agree on things. You're not always going to see eye to eye, right? But you can always still trust that person to know that they're going to be there. They're going to have your back. They're not going to say mean, hateful, whatever things to you, kind of thing. And we can rely on that. And just as Brian pointed out earlier, knowing that that person's going to be there at the end of the day and trusting that. So let's talk about that. What would it look like to let go of the fear and to trust somebody?
So, the situation that I was talking about with the person I was dating is very similar to what Jennifer was talking about as far as, being open and vulnerable until you see things that cause you concern. And it wasn't the way I reacted by putting walls up. It didn't help things. It wasn't healthy, because it sabotaged any chance of resolving those things, because these red flags weren't really, as serious. They weren't necessarily deal breakers, but in my mind at the time they were. And so being able to be aware of what your triggers are and what things are going to make you fearful, whether it be things that just you are generally afraid of, like, you may be afraid of, somebody is going to pay more attention to their hobbies than to you. And so people who have a hobby, you're very wary of that, or it may be something from your past where, you've been hurt by somebody in a certain way. And so when someone says or acts like, that person from your past, that may trigger something. And so learning what those triggers are, like thinking for yourself about, okay, here are the things that could cause me concerns, and knowing those about yourself. That way, when they come up, your heart is going to want to put up those walls. It's going to want to fear, but you can say, no, this is just a trigger. It doesn't mean I have to be afraid and run away. I can talk healthily, with the person that I'm dating. I do know them. I do trust them. I can open up to them and talk about it, And so being able to, have your mind help you through that, to get to a place where you can have those conversations and talk through things, that really helps to, overcome that fear. And as you do talk through those things, then that builds your trust and commitment and reliance further as you realize, oh, I can open up about these really hard things and these concerns. And, that person is not going to shame me or run away or whatever, as you see that, oh, they do genuinely care about me and they want to work with me on this. And this is something we can get through. That's going to continue to build that trust and everything. So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
That's awesome.
So can I say something to follow that up?
Definitely.
I think you're exactly right, Brian, that when we find those things, our triggers or whatever, and we are able to talk to the person that we are getting to know, and I think to me that's where the deal breakers show themselves, how they handle you talking to them about your fears and your how you need to move forward. I think that's when you find the meat and potatoes of a relationship is right at that point, when you can be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I'm afraid right now and I need you. And how they respond tells a lot about what your relationship is going to look like moving forward.
Yep. That's awesome.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that further, like, as far as the triggers, and then as far as red flags, some things that are triggers aren't red flags necessarily, and some are. Or not necessarily red flags, but deal breakers. You know what I mean? Some things you can talk through, and other things you could try to talk through it, but like Jennifer was saying, if they don't want to change, it may be a deal breaker. I think we all have certain things that, if we found them out about a person, might be deal breakers for us, you know?
Definitely. Yep. Been through that too. That's not an easy thing. Hey, so anyone else want to share any thoughts on overcoming fear and learning to trust?
Sometimes you just have to get to the point where you're willing to push past your own boundaries in order to let other people in.
Right. Well, yeah, that was what we were talking about, originally.
And I've got, I've had to deal with a lot of triggers from my past, and I've had to go back and reevaluate what was actually going on at that time. Who was I then? I've changed. I'm not the same person. I don't have to react the same way.
Right.
And apply who I am now to my current situation. And have they always been this way? Are they in the process to change too? And we both need to be willing. If we're going to have a relationship, we're both going to have to be willing to work at it. It won't work any other way. You can't just have one person trying to fix the situation when you come into a boundary that one or the other has. They both have to be willing to look at that boundary and see where it's from and work on it for the relationship to continue on.
Right.
And I think Jennifer was right about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go.
I'm joining late. My apologies. And I'm in my car, and it's pouring down rain, so I apologize to everyone. As I shared many weeks ago, one of the things that, and I think what Jennifer said and Brian said are huge. And to add to that is like just communication, right? So with my younger children, with their dad, one of the things that he was so good about is, because of how I was raised and because I've always been very independent, I react. Because for me, it's about having a backup plan and having a backup to my backup plan. And I think that's just running out of, if you've ever been a single parent, whether you're a mom or a dad as a single parent, you run in survival mode. I think I don't know if you guys experience that yourself, where you feel like it's survival mode, right? Yes. So Jim used to tell me a lot of times when I would start to react, because if something happened, I was very quick to go into gear of my backup plan. And he would point out to me, he'd say, you're doing it, you're reacting. And he would very gently do it. It took a long time for me he would just say, you're reacting. I need to take a step back. And so for many, many years of that coaching with him, and now that he's not here, I do hear his voice sometimes telling me when I am in certain situations and I'm reacting, and I like Brian and Jennifer was saying, and you guys have been saying, know those triggers, right? Know what those triggers are, and when you start recognizing them, then you're able to kind of take a step back and reevaluate your behavior versus somebody else's.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. I appreciate you sharing that, Lori.
Sure. Well, because so often it's much easier for us to recognize shortcomings and faults of other people, because maybe they don't fit in the box that we're looking for, or the category. Because we all, I think, there's several of you that are a lot younger than I am, but I think when you get to be older and you've gone through a divorce, or you've gone through a death, you've gone through a separation, your ideas of what a perfect relationship or the ideal relationship changes a lot. And I think that sometimes we have a tendency to look at the other person. We can recognize faults of others. Sometimes we just have to reevaluate and look at ourselves and and question. Do you guys remember the saying when you see somebody pointing at, pointing at somebody else is accusing, or you're not doing this? You're pointing one finger to them, but there's also 3 fingers pointing back to you. So what are the things that you can improve on instead of always looking at the other person's faults? How can you make a difference?
I love it. Love it. Yeah, definitely. And sometimes that helps us in developing a trust in someone else. And because we can see their strengths versus their weaknesses, and it takes a long time to overcome that mindset. If that's something that you are doing already, is whenever you look at somebody and you see what's wrong with them, whether it be wrong with what they're wearing or saying or doing or whatever. But if you can see what they're doing well and compliment that, and look at their strengths or whatever, sometimes it just starts there, just with a work relationship or a friendship or even with your kids or whatever, before you get into a dating relationship. If you can start training your mind to see that, that's awesome. So there's a book that I work with leading my team. It's called Strengths Finders, or Strengths Finder. No, I think it's Strengths Finders. It's through Gallup. They actually do a Strengths Finder test, and they will do that little it's like a personality type thing. They'll list your strengths in order. So I work with the top 10 and the bottom 5. There's like 34 strengths that they work with. And I know what my top 10 are, and I know what my bottom 5 are, right? Like I know what, not necessarily that I'm weak at, but let's just say I'm not as strong at, okay? Because nothing's like a real weakness. It's still a strength, but it's just down there a little lower on the list, okay? And so I focus on that when I'm leading my team. And that's what I've also integrated in when I lead a committee, is I value and I love their strengths, and I emphasize on that. There are some people I depend on greatly for details. I'm not great at details. So that's good. So I'm trusting them to be able to do that. And they know that. And we've developed a friendship through the years working together to be able to do that.
Now, Paula, is that a book where you learn those strengths and weaknesses, or is it a link that you could share?
Yeah. Strengths Finder 2.0. You can get it from Amazon. If you buy the book, you can get a code in the back of it, and then it'll tell you the website to go to take that test, and that code will get it for free. Well, I think you get your top 5 for free, and then you have to pay a little bit more to open up all 34, something like that. But yeah, there's a whole book on it. Emphasizes.
Is that a link you can share with us?
Yeah, well, sure, I can do that. Let me just look it up, and I'll put it in the chat, and then I can share it with you guys later too, if you want me to.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's just awesome. You can also, I think you can go to Gallup and just do it there too. But I like getting the book because I like looking up my strengths and being able to do that. But there's even a strengths-based marriage. So I got that book. So then I know how I can use my strengths in a relationship, and being able to do that as well. But there's even strengths-based parenting. There's strengths-based everything. Strengths-based leadership. Yeah, it is kind of awesome. Okay, let me look that up and I'll put it in there. But
thank you.
Yeah, Strengths Finder 2.0. Tom Rath is the author. Yeah, great thing. And then that way, it does kind of help you be able to retrain your brain per se to look at people's strengths and to celebrate their strengths. And a lot of times people aren't necessarily celebrated in what they do well. More people, like I said earlier, they tend to look at let's see what we can do to improve this, right? Like, I know I did that a lot in parenting back before I learned this, and going, okay, well, you're doing this well, but we really need to work on this. But what they have found is that when you accentuate what their strengths are, then their weaknesses also in the same turn become more become stronger. Because they're not getting a lot of attention. And that they have to kind of develop other characteristics to be able to keep their strength strong. So, yeah. So, for instance, my number one is I'm an activator, which means somebody gives me an idea and I'm on it. I'm going to make it happen, right? And my friends, I'm sure, can see that, right? Like the people who have worked with me and whatever. But before I knew that, I was told things like, Paula, you're just too overzealous. You're just too much. You're just kind of over the top. You just do too much, right? Whereas for me, it's more of a thing of, I want to make this happen and I want to do it right. And, and here it is. But I can see the big picture in making that happen. Now, I have other strengths too. That's just my number one. So I remember taking that test and just kind of crying because I felt so validated when I read what it was. It was like, I'm not too much. That's just who I am. And then I felt celebrated. And no longer did I see my strength as a weakness. And a lot of times, sadly, a lot of people see what they're good at, what they're strong at, as a weakness. Because sometimes people have told you, you know what, you're just too emotional, or you're too this, or you're too that, or you're too whatever, right? We get all the twos. But yet, being able to be celebrated for who we are, the way the Lord made us, is just kind of awesome. Sorry, I went way off tangent there, but it does kind of play back into being able to trust somebody and knowing who they are, knowing our strengths and how we relate to other people, and being able to use that in a way that is just so incredibly awesome, and being able to develop a good relationship that feels trusting, that feels committed, that feels healthy, because that's ultimately what we all want. And I know some of you guys were bringing up like the triggers or the deal breakers or the whatever. So there are things, I know I have them, that are deal breakers. They're just deal breakers. I don't want them to be deal breakers, but they're deal breakers. And it's just the way it is. And there's some things I don't budge on. And that's not always an easy thing. For instance, for me, religion is very important. And then different aspects of my religion are very important. And I don't budge on those. I just don't. And so whenever anybody asks me, would you consider dating a non-member? I already know my answer, right? Because that would totally go against everything that in me is important. Not to say that's not great for somebody else. This is just for me. Because I need that level of trust. And with that level of trust comes certain dynamics there that I can know are going to happen, that I can rely on. That I know that if you're committed to the Lord and to, certain aspects of it, then you can commit to me, and I can trust that you can do that you won't waver in that kind of thing. And I hope that didn't sound as rigid as that sounded to me. That's not what I'm meaning it to be, but it's just, I want somebody that's got a foundation and stands on that and doesn't waver. Loyalty is important to me, and to be loyal to the Lord is important to me. So that's got to be first in everyone's life. And I think, quite honestly, there's a level of trust. I don't care, and I tell people all the time, I don't care where you've been. I don't care what's in your past. I care what you're doing right now. Where are you headed? What's in your life? What's happening? Because the atonement's real. The atonement is an awesome, awesome thing. And the Lord can help us in overcoming our fears, can help us in developing trust. I had a friend last year that helped me in doing that. For the longest time, I had walls up that I didn't know I had walls up for. And through the years, those walls have slowly come down. And being able to trust somebody, to be able to give up that fear was a huge thing, because there's also a bit of control in that, right? Hold on down to that fear, protection. You're controlling the situation a little bit, and being able to open yourself up to go, okay, Lord, I'm ready. You know, let it happen. And just allowing that into your life. That's huge. Did that cause anybody to kind of, feel a little bit of anxiety, butterflies in your stomach? I don't know.
It didn't cause me any. It didn't cause me any anxiety or anything like that. But I think it's okay not to have your walls down for everybody. I think for me personally, I feel like you have to earn that respect for me before I'm going to just drop the walls down. Because it's not even a protection thing. It's just I don't want to let everybody on the inside. I don't think it's necessary. I think that it's actually more damaging to yourself if you just are that wide open to just anybody. And then when you do open up to somebody, it kind of cheapens it for them, because they want that something special that nobody else is getting. For me, I don't know how everybody else feels, but that's how I feel. I don't want to date a guy that is willing to just open up to just anybody. But if he is willing to save that for me and be vulnerable for me, he's giving me a gift.
Sure. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because I realized that I did not communicate what I meant. Open to something the way that you're communicating it. So I'm so glad you said that, because what I meant is that I was open to possibilities. I was open to whatever the Lord is going to bring into my life. I
agree with your statement now that you cleared that up. I was just saying, okay, yeah, you can't expect me to be open to everybody. That's
right.
Not gonna happen.
No. Oh, no.
Well, but don't you also find, kind of like Jennifer, what you were saying, that if you've just met somebody, you're starting to date someone, and they just tell you everything, right? To me, it makes me wonder, there's some level of genuineness, right? It's kind of like what we were talking about many weeks ago, like pet names or calling someone babe or honey, or for me, it's kind of questions the sincerity of where that person's at.
Right, and I think that goes back to what Brian was sharing earlier in our conversation about boundaries. There are different boundaries, and one of them is people that just overshare from the start. And what I the analogy I use with that is a plant. Okay, so whenever you start a relationship, it's kind of like planting a seed. Right? And you want to give it some good soil. So you want to kind of build that in, right? And you want to make sure it's just got the right nutrient combination and everything for that seed to grow. So you're just kind of planting a seed, and maybe you've already developed that attraction, and let's call that the soil or whatever. Maybe you've already gotten to know them a little bit and whatever. But let's just say that you've agreed to go out with them, and you're planting that seed. And then, so an analogy, right? Let's just pretend we're going to take that with us on the date. And then they just brought a 25-pound bag of fertilizer, and they're just going to go dump it on this little potted plant, right? What do you think that's going to do? Kind of kill it, right? Maybe they're just going to dump a 5-gallon jug of water on it, and it's just going to drown it. It's just going to kill it. So the same analogy can be in a relationship. When we plant a seed, we want that to bloom, we want it to grow, we want to blossom and have it be a flowering tree if that's our ultimate goal, right? But we do that a little bit at a time. We add a little bit of water, a little bit of fertilizer, a little bit of sunshine, a little bit of everything, just a little bit at a time, daily, weekly, whatever, to help that grow to be a healthy plant. And if you look at that in the same way with the relationship development, just think about planting that seed and what that's going to bloom and grow to be. So when you start off oversharing, I want you to picture a 5-gallon bucket of water being poured on a plant. You're just smothering it. You're just going to drown it. You're going to kill it. going to kill that relationship before it has a chance to even try to grow. Same thing with fertilizer, or if you do nothing else but just give it sunshine or whatever. I hope you're understanding my point here. But it's just the same way. You've got to be able to do it a little bit at a time to develop something healthy that's going to last a long time. Oversharing is overstepping boundaries. And I know I tell people, we all have stuff that's not comfortable to share. We all have stuff that, I call whammies. It might be a little tough for people to hear, that for some people could be a deal breaker, maybe not, maybe, we don't know, right? But it's putting that vulnerable side of us out there. And then what they're going to do with it. And if you do that all at once, I'm telling you, that's how you get rid of people. So if you want to know how to get rid of people that maybe you're not that interested, go bam, 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 bam. And they'll go. Drown them out. It won't last.
Paula, that's not necessarily true. Some people think that that's what they want. Like, some people really honestly feel like that's the way to handle the situation. And both male and female do this. I mean, one of the folks does not have a corner market on that. But some people think in their minds that is the healthy way to do it. I just want to put all of my bad stuff out there, so this person has the right to choose that or not. But here's the deal. If you just take it, like you said, and just feed it, just step by step, some of those things, you can tell their progress and how the atonement has worked in their life. And something that might have been a deal breaker is now a huge strength in them, because you're able to see that they can do hard things. And if they can accomplish hard things on their own, they definitely can do a good job accomplishing a hard thing in a relationship with you.
Definitely. I love that. Thank you. Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah. But it does kind of not have the relationship get off to a good start if you are sharing everything up front. And I agree, it happens. I mean, I know I used to do it early on. I just felt like, you're just going to have to know this, because I've just been through all this stuff, and I'm just going to be honest with you. So if you stay with me, then I know that that we've got a chance. And if not, oh well, they're not going to stay. I mean, now I go, it's not that bad. I mean, it's bad, but it's not me. I don't know. Anyway, it's just like, it wasn't as bad as it felt then. Let's put it that way. And knowing now that it's part of my story versus something that I feel like I have to tell everybody. Because once you can get past the point of feeling like you've got to tell everybody everything, then then you're in a healthier spot. And it is easier to pick and choose who you're going to be.
Right. And Paula, I agree with Jennifer too, that it depends on the person on the receiving end, right? Mm-hmm. In how much they're listening to what the other person's saying and not being judgmental. I think of how I shared with this group a month and a half ago my story, right? And that was quite fearful for me. But, being a member of the church, there is a lot of judgment in some, and that, we're supposed to be in this box of behavior, right? So there is that fear, but I think it just, I felt comfortable enough in sharing it with this group simply because I wanted it out there, kind of like I think what Jennifer was saying, and Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, is I kind of felt it was necessary for me to say that just because of my viewpoints, in that I would never want anybody to think that, she wasn't even married in the church. What gives her the right to say that? or, you know, sharing some of my viewpoints as I have. So I think sharing is good. I think you kind of have to know your audience and who you're with. And I think kind of like what you were saying as far as deal breakers, right? That if somebody's not willing to, if you're dating someone and they're not willing to accept you or some of the things that you've gone through, and some of those things can be character building, right? What has shaped your character, and that's a deal breaker for them, then I'm kind of one of those people, I'd rather know it up front than to prolong that. Not to say that you should just dump on them the first date that you have, but sometimes it's, to me, more appropriate to get the hard stuff out of the way.
But I think you are correct, but you've got to know your audience. And
Exactly.
And the person that you're talking to, if they can't handle it, and if you haven't given them enough time to know whether they can handle it or not, then you could be sharing something that you don't necessarily need to share.
Exactly. No, I totally agree.
To
totally
somebody
agree with that,
that
Jennifer.
it's not necessary for them to know.
Right. Nope,
So,
I agree.
yeah.
Well, and like I said, you have to kind of pick and choose, right? And you have to know your audience. Do you trust that person enough to know in a short period of time to share something personal?
Right. And I do think it's important, though, that they get the opportunity to make a decision whether it's a deal breaker for them or not. And talking about it and being upfront about it early on versus waiting till late in the relationship is good. But I think that there is a too early.
I agree.
Yeah, I think too, it depends on what it is. You know, for instance, I remember I told somebody one time I had 5 kids, and that was their deal breaker. I remember several men that I joked that for the longest time I never made it past the second date, because by the second date they knew about my son Matthew with Asperger's, and their question inevitably was, "Will he always have to live with you?" And you know, he was 9 when I was newly single, so I mean now he's 21. But my answer then was, I don't know. I've never raised a kid like Matthew. I'm learning as I go. I hope that he can live independent, but I don't know. Never got asked out again. And so it wasn't until my kids got older and Matthew is more independent that now I know a better answer to that, because I still get that same question. And that, in many cases for me, has been the reason I'm not married. And that's been a tough one, to know something beyond my control. But that does come up early on. And it's not like I'm gonna, you know, when somebody asks me out, oh, by the way, I've got a son with Asperger's, are you okay with that? You know? So, and he's high functioning, and sometimes it was just maddening to me, because he is high functioning. It's not like he's, and even if he wasn't, you know, but either way, it was like, you didn't even meet him, and you're judging something that, you know, again, beyond my control. But anyway, it is it is different, and that's the thing of trust and vulnerability and whatever. And then getting into other aspects of my story or my family or whatever, it is different. And I always tell people, because a lot of people want to know, Paula, you've been single for how long? And you're not married yet? I'm like, well, you know, there's some stuff there that, and it is easier for a lot of men to get involved with somebody else that doesn't have what I have, that's not dealing with what I'm dealing with. You know what I mean? There are some, and I'm being vulnerable here, people. There's some things in my story that were beyond my control. Nothing I can do about it. But it's some heavy stuff. So whenever a man says, I don't want to marry a woman with baggage, I'm like, okay, let me introduce you then to somebody else. Because I need somebody hooking up a tool belt and going, hey, let me carry some of that. Right?
But Paula, here's the thing. You don't want to be with somebody that can't handle your son or that can't handle that baggage with you.
No, I don't. You're right. You're right.
Right, exactly. And so they actually did you a favor by very early on saying, oh, no. Because then you couldn't catch feelings for them and start missing some of those signs.
Right. And a lot of times, too, I would say, if you can't handle the fact that I have a kid with Asperger's, you're not going to be able to handle the rest of this, because that's the easy part. You know? Like, I'll make it look good, people. So, but yeah, I mean, now, now it's so much better than it was 12 years ago when everything happened. Don't get me wrong. I mean, my kids are all grown, and, it's a lot different now, and it's way better now, but we've had a lot of time. But still, our story is going to be a lifetime story, because things we've gone through not going to end just because I got divorced. There's just it's stuff ongoing, and like my son with Asperger's, that's not going to go away. But he's a great kid. He's a sweetheart. He's like my big helper. He's 6'3", 200 pounds, and family cook. He's awesome. But for some people, that was a deal breaker for them. That was a deal breaker for them, and I honored that. It wasn't like they were a bad person because of that. That was their deal breaker. So we all have different wants, and we all have different things that we can or can't accept or want to live with or whatever, right? I've heard of people that will say, I don't want to marry somebody that is this certain marital status, or I don't want to marry somebody that's got this kids that are this ages, or, like there's people stipulations, because for them that's a deal breaker. And I'm just like, okay. So, but yeah, I mean, there's just a lot entailed with developing a healthy relationship and being able to get through some of the deal breakers, being able to trust somebody and overcome that fear and get through that.
Hey, Paula, I just want to share something with you guys. As my kids got in the car, they were playing volleyball.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of sharing, they have a friend with them, sharing them that this is a singles group at our church, right? Yeah. So as you're talking, and I shared with the girls, I had a guy tell me, because I had 2 girls still at home a couple of years ago, they were not interested at all. And my youngest daughter goes, "Did you say?"
Said they missed out because we were some bomb kids.
They missed out because we're some bomb kids.
I love it. Awesome.
So, yeah. So, you just never know. Everybody has their own view of what they're looking for and what fits in their lifestyle and their mold, right? And we have that same vision for us, what we're looking for, right? That's what makes us all different. But so it's unfortunate, because sometimes it's hurtful, and we're I guess that's for me. That's why I try really hard not to judge, because you don't really know someone's circumstances, or like I said, I get accused of being too independent, and men don't like independent women, and I am that way because of my past and because I've had to be. I've not had a choice. So
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, I'll stop talking now.
No, that's all good. That's all good. I appreciate you sharing. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, but there are just different, and there's no right or wrong. It is the way people feel, and it just is what it is. No judgments. People may feel like they can't deal with that for whatever reason, and that's okay. That's okay. But yeah. So anyway. So that's pretty much.
Just to add on to that, as far as sharing things too early or whatever, and deal breakers, all that kind of thing. Like I like to get stuff out of the way pretty early on, but some of the heavier things in my life, there's a surface layer to it that I'll share early on, and then there's multiple layers to it. Like most people know that I'm divorced and widower. And, you know, my wife passed away almost 3 years ago. Well, that's the surface layer. There's a lot more to that story, you know, but I'm not going to just share it with anybody. But, you know, people need to know that I'm a divorcee and a widower. I've been married twice. There's complications with that, you know, both as far as grief and, the kids are my exes, and there's childcare things, and, you know, people need to know that kind of thing up front, you know, because like I can't move to Utah. So
Right.
if somebody's in Utah, they're either moving here or it's not happening, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. There are different layers, right? And there's easier ways for all of us to share our stories because of that, because we can keep it kind of surface. There's aspects of mine though that and aspects of all of ours that tend to lead to other questions that we'd have to go deeper into it, and we're like, I don't want to do that right now. So so a lot of times I just touch on what I feel like is the easier stuff first, and then go on from there. And we all have our own way of doing it for whatever reason, and that's okay. I am the only parent in my 5 children's lives, and that's been a tough thing. And there's a lot of layers in that one. A lot of layers in that one. And it's been a long time. So, I mean, my kids are great. They've turned out really good based on everything they've been through. So I'm, but it wasn't easy, and it's not perfect, and it's not, the perfect family, whatever, as far as the church goes. But, but we all do what we can, and we do our best with what we've got. Nobody's got a perfect life, no matter how great they look on Sunday. They do not have.
And Paula, you have to remember, I'm in the same boat there with you. I'm the only parent with 4 children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both of their fathers have passed away.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to constantly remind yourself, as I do, that you have 5 great children because of the sacrifices and the wonderful parenting that you're doing. And sometimes, as parents, we're all there, single parents, we don't give ourselves enough credit for the things that we do. It's easy for us to be down on ourselves. And, I'm always saying that, I fall short, and, especially when you're a working parent and you're running around and you're doing a lot of things, it's easy to find fault or judge yourself and not give yourself the praise that you deserve. So we just kind of need to remind ourselves that we are doing a good job. And the most important thing is we're teaching our children the gospel, right? We're keeping the gospel in their life, and we're teaching them, to love other people, and to understand and have a solid foundation. And when things get going bad, where to turn, right? I have one child, my only son, he's not active anymore. And I had a conversation with him this morning before I went to church. And, he's 25 and going through this phase of, I know there's a higher power. And when he first told me that a couple years ago, I just about came through my skin. And he said it again today. And then, of course, I've had to, when things get really tough for him, he calls me and says, can you say a prayer for me? So today he said it again, about the higher power thing. And I called him out on it and said, you can't say that you don't believe in God and then ask to pray, right? You can't say a prayer if you don't believe that God is really there to help you. Because sometimes I'll tell him, at this point, the best thing for you to do is get down on your knees and you pray and ask for help. And so, as parents, it's tough. But again, in hearing you talk this evening, and again, I apologize for joining late, just remember to pat yourself on the back, right? All of you guys. We have to remember to pat ourselves on the back a little bit and give ourselves enough credit, because you know what? We are moving forward. We get up every day, we go to work, and we are moving forward in a positive direction.
Amen.
I'll see you in a bit.
Yeah, and I think ultimately we do rely on the Lord, and we do need to trust Him, and that's where our ultimate trust is. And being able to raise kids, or being able to have healthy relationships, and being able to live the gospel day in and day out, and be able to stay going strong, and be able to keep moving forward, and to be able to get out of a funk if you're in a funk, or being able to appreciate the strengths of other people. There is so much that we have to offer the world, that we have to offer our families, we have to offer the single adult program, or whatever. But trusting in the Lord is going to be our first test of trust. Being able to overcome the fear of our plan not working out, and trust that His plan is better, and trust in His timing, and in His way, His path, and have Him lead us, and continue to pray that it will all work out, because it will. It always does. Anybody else have any other comments before we leave for tonight?
Well, I'd like to just share one more thing real quick.
Sure.
Sorry, guys, because when I get on here, I always talk so much.
Okay.
Is I will say that, for me, up until you started this Sunday evenings, and I hate that I've missed it. I've had so much going on. We've had a couple armed robberies in my neighborhood in the last couple weeks, and it's been kind of chaotic on my side. But I appreciate everybody always sharing their story and sharing, their views, because it helps me. I've gone years without participating, without just kind of feeling kind of like kind of removed. I go to church, I come home, I go to work, I have my kids, I have activities. And so it's nice to have a conversation and listen to like-minded people that are in the same boat. So thank you for helping me. You might not think you're helping, but for me, I appreciate everybody's feedback and all the comments that people share. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Lori. I do.
And I just wanted to give everybody a reminder that the Lord, He can give us, promptings that make us feel that something's not right. He can even give us like an anxious feeling that, wait, that something's not right here. But He's never going to give us fear. He's never going to give us like a panic attack. It does not come from the Lord. And so if you're just feeling flat out fear, that's Satan. And figuring out why you have that fear and having the Lord help you with it is really important, because Heavenly Father doesn't want us to be afraid. Like you were saying to start this, faith and fear don't exist in the same place. So just remember, when you feel that fear, it's not Heavenly Father. He doesn't want us to be afraid. He says,
Awesome.
Fear not, believe.
Yeah.
I have been keeping my mouth shut more than usual.
Okay.
And I am this minute looking at the Bible verse. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And my therapist tells me when I face a problem that that's what I need to remember, is that I have that power and I have that love, and that's what I need to deal with, what I have to use to deal with whatever the situation is. I'm the oldest one of everybody here. I've raised.
You know that? I don't know if you know that.
Well, let's put it this way. At lunch the other day, my daughter said, "Mom, you need to remember we're all over 40." Okay?
Yeah.
You need to let us go a little bit.
Yeah. Awesome.
But I've listened to what everybody said, and I've heard references to various books or with different therapists, and I don't argue with the use of those things, because I have got this whole shelf full of books and that I've used to get through the past 40 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And it all, whatever is useful out of any of those books are those things that the Spirit confirms to me. And in relationships, in situations, in whatever has come up in my life, what is most important of all of it is that the Spirit brings it to me when I need it. And I've had to develop a sensitivity to the Spirit, and my biggest challenge is maintaining that sensitivity to the Spirit, for the Holy Spirit and Heavenly Father to let me know what to do next, instead of getting carried away with my own stuff.
Love it. I think that that's something that we can all take that advice and do that, because it is important that we do that.
Yeah.
For sharing that.
Okay.
Yeah, I love how Brian was even ending with a whole fear not. You know, that is something that fear is definitely not of the Lord.
Right. That's why I went in and read it off the wall, so I'd get the words right.
I appreciate you sharing that for sure. I'm glad you have that up there as a reminder, and I appreciate you sharing that with us for a reminder as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All righty. So, does anyone else have anything else to add? Comment? Okay. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday evening with me. Lori has asked if we could she wants to request a prayer because she's got an interview tomorrow. So if you guys wouldn't mind adding her to your prayers. So all goes well tomorrow for Lori.
Thank you. It's actually for the company Zoom.
Oh, wow. The irony of that one, right? Let me know how that one goes.
Well, what's so funny is I'd never even heard of Zoom until we got onto this your conference, Paula. So
you're like, hey, Zoom.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
There you go.
So yeah, if you guys don't mind saying a prayer, I'd appreciate it.
There you go.
Most definitely.
Thank you. Thanks.
Do that.
Definitely.
Yep.